Good job.
You don't know what, on a given mission, when you go out the door, exactly what you're going to run into as far as what the target is, you know, where the location is, the elevation, the threats that are around it. You have to decide, what am I going to do to take out this target today, given all these different variable conditions.
3-4, the wind is 10010.
Yes, the line, Falcon 01.
For most aviators, a blue sky is an invitation to pull the aircraft off the runway, light the afterburners, and point upwards. Not so for the attackers. These are the pilots and the aircraft that are tasked to the air-to-ground and the close air support mission. They bring fast-moving aerial firepower to bear on the battlefield. Their tactics combine deception, high-G maneuvering, and plain air-to-ground power.
We're at Angels 24 and 25, sir. We'd like to bubble at Angels 25, sir.
Well, there's many different things we can do in the attack role. We can do a high altitude profile, which is a lot of what we did in the Gulf. We're also trained in the low level environment, 200 feet, 500 knots, racing around with our hair on fire, and then we'll pop up doing like an afterburner climb, climbing up high and then diving in. So usually it's bomb delivery is normally visual 40-degree dive type. With about a 6 or 7 G pull out.
Fighter pilots are guys that go up and fight other airplanes, and oh, by the way, drop bombs. Attack pilots are guys that fight airplanes and drop bombs.
What makes most A-10 pilots love to fly the A-10, it's not so much the airplane, it's the mission that we do. And personally speaking, for me, and most A-10 pilots, I think, feel the same way, we would get bored doing, say, just the air-to-air type mission where you just go out and practice the, air-to-air intercepts, dogfighting, that type of stuff every day. Most of us get a real kick and enjoy flying the A-10 because we're flying down close to the treetops at high speeds and dropping bombs on target. And there's a very strong sense of satisfaction of getting immediate feedback from your bomb pass because you can see it land on the target. You can tell if you hit it.
Flying low is very exciting. There's nothing like the rush at 200 feet and 500 knots with a canyon going by you. In fact, it's even more impressive when you kind of turn up and you're at an 80-degree angle of bank turn at that fast, pulling 5 Gs to get around the corner, and that's when the ground really, you feel the rush, and it is quite a thrill.
We're designed to operate in the weeds, and the saying goes, we're down in the weeds with our hair on fire trying to stay out of the enemy's way.
We're flying through a AAA or SAM environment. We're going to need to be maneuvering the jet constantly, and this is 4, 5, 6G maneuvering in what we call a glib maneuver. There's different ones for different system, but it's basically weird angles and just a lot of hard up and down, left and right turning. At the same time, you're navigating, getting your system all set up, keep an eye on your wingman, and also looking over your shoulder, checking for the bad guy. So definitely down low, it's much more demanding, and you're pretty whipped by the time you do even a 1-hour flight down there.
The F-16 in the air-to-ground role is literally unsurpassed of any fighter in the world, in my personal opinion. Now, I'm a bit prejudiced because I fly the aircraft, but the aircraft is extremely agile, and it's extremely accurate, and the cockpit visibility afforded the pilot is phenomenal. The onboard avionics assist tremendously with navigation to the target. You have tremendous thrust, so the aircraft can maintain very high combat speeds and does not lose much speed during a very tight turn. Our ability to turn and move very tightly is a tremendous asset in negating enemy gunners and defeating surface-tearing missiles that may be launched at us, we can actually turn and give them a turn that they cannot follow us through.
Marine Corps' primary mission is to attack, seize, and defend advanced naval bases in the continuation of a land war ashore. The principal mission of the AV-8B is to provide immediate close air support to the Marines on the ground. We exist solely to add additional fire support to our troops, and due to its V-stall capability, we can add a lot of flexibility to our basing so that we can remain close to the frontline troops and respond immediately to their calls.
We exist, and the A-10 exists, in the close air support concept in order to support the Army from the air in their close-in conduct, and then some other of our aircraft, the fighters, the high-altitude interdictors, the F-15s, the 16s, etc., exist to support us or keep the bad Air Force off of our back, so to speak, so that we can do our jobs, so that the Army can do their jobs, so that in the end, this combined team concept comes out a victor.
It's probably one of the most overtasking environments you'll get in. Coming in at 8 to 9 miles a minute, you're popping up into your attack. As you're popping into your attack, your FAC's got to get his eyes on you to see that you're pointing in the right direction. As we roll in, we'll give a wings level call. He's looking to make sure our nose is pointing in the right direction. We're trying to acquire the friendlies to determine where they're at. And yes, there's a lot of dust around. There's a lot of smoke. There can be a lot of explosions going off and so on. And then you're trying to look ahead. First thing you want to try to do is pick out where your friendlies are, and then you want to look ahead and try to pick out and acquire the target. As you're going in, the FAC's giving you wings level called, clear and hot. You're responding to that, going and trying to hit the target, and depending on what the enemy threat's like out there, it can be very overloading at times.
Attackers fly with the battlefield, their movement controlled from the ground by FACs, or forward air controllers. Attack jets, armored mobile platforms for powerful weaponry, are designed and equipped according to their mission. The AV-8 Harrier, using its vertical flight capabilities and quick acceleration, flies close to the lines, leapfrogging the front in immediate support of ground forces. The A-10 Warthog, targeting tanks and armored vehicles, incorporates a heavily armored titanium bathtub to protect its pilot. Forward of the battlefield, the FA-16 interdicts enemy assets while relying on its speed and agility to avoid hostile fire.
As a ground forward air controller, of course, my job is getting the fighter's eyes on the target, and if I can't mark it, at least to get his eyes on it to where he hits the target. Very favorably impressed with the A-16. It'd come in fast, find the target, hit it, and leave. And that's all a ground FAC really needs out of an airplane.
This aircraft has 4 attributes that I consider very important to do casts in the year 2000 and beyond. You must be able, I think you must be very small yet agile. You must be able to carry a very respectable load of ordnance, and you have to deliver that ordnance very accurately. And in addition, you have to be able to do that at nighttime as easily as you can do it in daytime.
Bulldog, Crockett 3-2.
Crockett 3-2, go ahead.
Roger, Bulldog 2, check 40 past the air. Indicate Alpha 2.
Crockett 3-2, say that authentication again.
Roger, ma'am. 2 Alpha.
Kilo India.
3-2 is checking in with you at 4-1 past the hour.
Contact.
At base +5. Requesting sweet and sour.
Crockett 3-2, have negative contact. You're going to have to give me a positive first.
Ma'am, Crockett 3-2 is 2-5 up Delaware.
Stand by, searching. 774, push, yellow 3.
Michelob 1-1, check. 2. Bulldog, Crush 03.
Crush 03, go ahead.
Crush 03, airborne as fragged on the Delaware 120 at 10.
Crush, stand by, unable to give you radar.
When you pre-flight the F-16, you start with the forms. As every good aviator knows, checking the forms, the recent maintenance that's been done, any outstanding write-ups that may be on the aircraft, how it's been performing over its last few flights is very important. It gives you a feel for the aircraft before you ever get in it. We move clockwise around the aircraft. We go around the nose of the airplane, checking that all the pitot tubes and the air data sensor ports are clear of obstructions. We check the engine bay to make sure that the engine inlet bay to make sure that the opening is clear and no obstructions. We move around to the right side of the aircraft and check that the gun has been armed. That's actually the point where they set the rounds limiter to allow you to shoot the gun. Then we go up into the wheel well and check it, and then you check the right wing ordnance to ensure that it's properly loaded, the fuses are set right, the carts that will actually fire and release the bomb are in place. You check your right wing missile and make sure that it's full up and ready to go. Then you check the back end of the airplane to ensure the tail hook is good and the pin has been removed so it will work. And you check the outlet for the engine to make sure the nozzles are in good working order and that there appears to be no hot spots on the engine that have recently been discolored or burned through. Then you move back around to the left side of the airplane and basically mirror image of the right side to ensure that all the switches are set properly, that the wingtip missile's in good shape, the ordnance on the left wing is good. We carry the Sidewinder heat-seeking missiles on the wingtips. We also can carry 2 underwing missiles on the immediate inboard station from the wings, giving us the capability to carry 4 Sidewinders into battle, which we generally did in Desert Storm. Next stations are bomb stations, and we can load either pylon-mounted 2,000-pound Mark 84 type bombs, or we can put a triple ejector rack on there that will hold 3 munitions of various types, and we did carry all the types there are to carry. We carried cluster bomb units, CBUs. We carried Mark 82 bombs, and we also single-mounted some Mavericks AGM-65, the TV or infrared guided missiles. The next 2 stations coming in right next to the fuselage, just due to the ranges we had to travel, they can either carry munitions or wing fuel tanks, and we generally loaded the wing fuel tanks on there to extend our range. On the centerline station, we can either load a single bomb, a fuel tank, or an ECM pod, electronic countermeasures pod, which we carried during Desert Storm to negate enemy radars and to defeat enemy missiles that may have onboard radars. To sit in the cockpit of the F-16 is the closest experience I think that man can actually have to flying himself. When I first started to fly the aircraft, I felt almost vulnerable because you sit up so high in this bubble canopy, literally there is nothing around you from your knees up. You are just completely out in the wind stream, protected only by this thin plate of plexiglass. Once you become accustomed to that feeling, because you don't have the wings in your peripheral vision, you literally feel like it is you that is actually flying. On the taxi out, you either continue with programming your stores management system or reviewing what's going to happen immediately after takeoff. Just as a technique, most of the guys will review emergencies on takeoff. What if the engine fails on takeoff? What if I have some type of gear malfunction on takeoff? The critical action things that require instantaneous action, where you don't have a whole lot of time to think, guys will try to think about those ahead of time so they properly react if the problem comes up. The F-16 has such great thrust that you cannot run the engine up to 100% to check it because the brakes will not hold the airplane in place. And so we generally run the engine up to 80%, and we have preset values that we check. You do that, and then you stir the stick and make sure the flight controls are good. Everybody's sitting there running at 80% power. And then you pass head nods up the line to say my airplane's good. Once the final head nod gets to the flight lead, he releases brakes and advances the throttle to the full military or to afterburner, depending on the type of takeoff. The afterburner has 5 stages. They light one at a time, about 1 second apart, and you can actually feel all 5 stages kick in. You mentally count as each stage of afterburner lights, and you can glance down and see the nozzles open up a little bit more as each stage of burner lights. By the time the 5th stage kicks in, you're it's like being in a jet fuel dragster. Depending on the load you have, about the time the 5th stage kicks in, the nose wheel steering's coming off, because now the airplane is going fast enough to steer with air pressure across the rudder. And you go back to the airspeed indicator, and generally by now the airspeed indicator is jumping up close to 150 knots, and it's getting to be time to start putting in back pressure on the stick. The thought of back pressure is about all it takes to get the airplane in the air, as the F-16 is so aerodynamic it wants to leap into the air.
A powerful air-to-ground fighting machine is the A-10 Warthog. It carries the 7-barreled 30mm Avenger Gatling gun. It has 11 hardpoints for armament, and it proved to be a deadly platform for the Maverick missile. With its big 58-foot wingspan, the A-10 is built to move low and slow over the battlefield.
Popular saying goes in the A-10, and I think this describes it very well, is one day a bunch of engineers were sitting around the table, and they had this fantastic Gatling gun that just pours out these huge 30mm shells at a very rapid rate, and they kind of scratched their head and said, I wonder if we can make this thing fly. And that's how the A-10 was born, because these guys decided they were going to make this gun fly, so they built the A-10 around the gun. The gun itself, very powerful 30mm. It fires around 4,000 rounds a minute, so it's really pouring out a lot of lead. Our real weapon of choice for the A-10, obviously, is the Maverick missile, and that's usually carried just a few stations in from the wingtip. The Maverick missile is a precision-guided weapon in that it is able to lock on to a specific target, either using light contrast, like you would on a black and white TV set, or using a heat source, heat contrast between the actual target and its background, whether it's hotter or colder, and gives you a blip on side the screen on the aircraft that way. And you're able to lock this missile onto that specific target, and once the Maverick missile has been launched off the aircraft, it's on its own, and it will remain locked onto that target. You can just fly away and start heading the other direction while the missile continues to fly at its target. Our standard way to fight and fly in the A-10 is as a 2 ships. The 2 of you can watch out for each other. It really makes your survivability rate go up tenfold, just having 2 of you there instead of 1.
My job as a wingman, first and foremost, is to be a good lookout for my lead, and to be a good formation pilot. I need to be right there so he can look out across his shoulder. He can see me at all times. That's my number 1 priority, is being in position. Secondary to that is backing him up on the radar and searching a sector that he assigned me to that his radar scan volume might not cover at that time.
The A-10 is a fantastic airplane as far as being able to take a hit and continue to operate. It's got, for one thing, the infamous titanium bathtub, as we like to call it, the shielding around the actual pilot that provides protection from up to a fairly good-sized a bullet from enemy ground fire will bounce off of that thing. We're all kind of sitting down in that, so it gives you some protection there. And then the other part of that equation is the multiple repetitive systems that the A-10 has, to where it can lose one hydraulic system and there's a backup. It can even lose one engine for that matter, and it has a backup.
back, sir.
Tell me the hog can't take some hits, huh?
Well, I'm telling you. I isolated both hydraulic systems. As soon as I was hit, the right system went to zero, and all the lights in the world came on. Missile went off, and I thought it was the SAM going by, so I started kicking flares out the back. And,
good show.
Thank you, Ronnie. Wish I'd have kept it on the runway for you, but the tire blew, and I just couldn't keep it on there.
We got plenty of time.
Well, we do now.
You got plenty of tires, too, right?
Yep.
Get 'em.
You got a crane?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a crane.
Yeah,
Boy, that Hummer was trying hard to blow you out of the air. Look at that.
You got an 80 here. Yeah.
Operating just feet above the ground is the AV-8B Harrier, a jet truly designed for close-in support. When the Marines put the Harrier into service in 1971, they combined the tactical advantage of a helicopter with the speed of a jet, a plane that could land anywhere from country roads to urban parking lots, jumping back and forth above the lines to stay above the battle, but close enough to the ground to keep the pilot's eyes on the target.
The advantage of the vectored thrust in the Harrier and why the Marine Corps bought it is we will not be tied to a fixed location. For example, a ship out at sea or a specific base ashore. We can move to a roadside, parking lots, and so on, and that can be easily done by bringing in fuel and bombs. We have a base that we call a forward arming refueling point, a FARP site, and we can set those up very quickly. Usually within 24 to 48 hours, we can have those set up and operational. What the VSTOL allows us to do is it allows us to land vertically at a confined site, load fuel and bombs onto the aircraft, and do a short takeoff at a couple hundred feet, get airborne, and keep us very close to the flow of the battlefield so that we can respond very quickly to any calls for fire support and close air support. We have radar warning receivers. We have antennas surrounding the aircraft that will pick up the emissions of an enemy radar trying to lock onto us. That will give us indications in the cockpit of what is looking at us and where it's looking at us from. And then tied into that, based on what we'll perceive, we have buckets filled with expendables. And what are in those expendables are things like flares. Flares that will defeat a heat-seeking missile because this flare will burn at a higher temperature than our engine will, so that would cause a heat-seeking missile to go after the flare. We have chaff, most easily thought of as chopped up aluminum foil that will be expended out into the air that will create a large radar signature, so an enemy radar would look at this large aluminum foil cloud that the aircraft could be hiding in or going past. It's a tight cockpit. You get inside there, you strap that aircraft on. Everything is very user-friendly, right at your fingertips. We utilize a HOTA system, hands-on throttle and stick, so that you can keep your hands on those primary controls and still utilize some of the very important functions that we need to accomplish in an attack. That white cord you see moving across the top of the canopy is what we call detonation cord. And what that's used for is in the first stage of an ejection, when the pilot pulls a handle, that detonation cord goes off and shatters a hole through the canopy that the seat and the pilot will then travel through. When you're sitting inside the Harrier, you've got about 22,000 pounds of thrust, approximately 5 feet behind you, and the intakes are about 1 foot behind you. So from engine startup to engine shutdown, you're very aware of the tremendous power that is parked right behind you. You've got that Rolls-Royce engine just growling right behind you, and when you go to max power on a takeoff, you know you're at full power, and that's why I think a lot of us wear double ear protection when we fly that aircraft. The Harrier can vector its thrust from 0 degrees down to 98 degrees. The aircraft's standard attitude is sitting at 8 degrees up, so when we put our nozzles all the way forward at 98 degrees, we can actually point the nozzles forward 16 degrees. What that can do for us is give us incredible deceleration at high airspeeds, which can be very advantageous in a dogfight. The front two are the cold nozzles, which puts out air up to 700 knots at about 100 degrees. It's coming off the turbofan. Right behind there, you have the hot nozzles, which is where the exhaust comes out right after the burner section. It'll come out there at about 1,000 knots at about 700 degrees Celsius. Given the option, we will always prefer to do a rolling takeoff. We'll accelerate down the runway at an airspeed where the computer, based on inputs we've programmed into it, altitude, airspeed, pressure, it will know that at a certain, if we have to produce, say, 10,000 pounds of additional lift, the computer will know that, okay, at 75 knots, this wing will produce that additional 10 or 15,000 pounds of lift that I require to get airborne. So we'll accelerate down, we'll look for that target airspeed. When we see that, we'll pull our nozzles into the proper angle that, again, the computer has figured out, and then the aircraft will jump off the deck, and that's kind of where you get the term the jump jet.
Our job is to help coordinate the air battle and the land battle. The radio section keeps all the radios, the 20 radios we have, up to speed and on the right frequencies, secured or desecured. The strength section communicates with aircraft that come in and leave the theater of operation. The intelligence section keeps track of threats in the area and also finds targets that are lucrative for us to put aircraft on. Army liaison keeps in touch with the Army and keeps the ground battle situation up to speed on our maps, gives us Army targets and advises us of what targets he wants us to hit. And the support section copies the battle damage assessment from the aircraft as they come out of the area of operation. Aircraft will check in with strike, and we'll usually send them to their prefab target, or we'll send them to higher priority targets, which we find out about through Intel, Army, or aircraft actually giving us pilot reports. An aircraft will come into the area, and we'll have coordinates of a Frog missile, for example, that we found, and we'll send those aircraft to destroy the Frog missile.
The battlefield. In the midst of what seems like chaos, a careful choreography is designed to coordinate the mix of aircraft in and out of the threat. Flying above the battle in a C-130, an airborne battlefield command and control center puts the right plane on the right target to deliver maximum firepower in support of troops on the ground.
The forward air controller evaluates the situation and goes forward to a ABCCC, a C-130 command post, if you will. They may forward that information directly to the AWACS, who we were in contact with en route to the Iraqi airspace. The AWACS would have us contact the ABCCC prior to entering enemy airspace, and the ABCCC would task us to contact the Army Forward Air Controller. As we approached the area, we would contact him, and he would relay information because he's in direct communications with the Army commander on the ground.
Target all the way over to the
It's always positive control from all the way from the ground people on up. We go ahead and talk to ground FACs, forward air controllers. Obviously, we have to deconflict. We're working closely with friendly troops within a few miles of the targets, or sometimes even less. So in that case, it's definitely a very controlled environment. And, you know, some of the missions can take up to half an hour prior to even putting a bomb on target to make sure that we have the right target and everything's deconflicted with our friendly forces.
We would generally ingress at a medium type altitude, drop down as required to locate the target or to find a target if we had the option to do that. And then we would set up an attack, and the flight members would attack that particular target, and then we would egress. And once we were departing the area, we would generally contact AWACS, the airborne controllers, to see if they had any additional tasking for us.
Target acquisition is one of the most difficult things, especially in a close air support environment where we're usually not going after a fixed target like a bridge or something. It's usually more of a dynamic environment. You might have units out there maneuvering, and to be able to acquire those, you have to get some elevation. You have to get that overhead view looking down upon the battle scene to best acquire the target, distinguish friendlies from enemies, and roll in and get your bombs on target.
The only instrument we really monitor in a bomb run is our heads-up display, and that's invaluable during a bombing run because it keeps your head out of the cockpit, and especially in a combat scenario where you're rolling in and they could be possibly firing at you, and you need to be acquiring a target. It's very important. What we do, we have set parameters depending on the event that we're delivering. We drop over there. We normally drop the bombs out of a dive bomb. And you may have seen like the old footage of World War II and the Stuka dive bomber coming down at about 90 degrees. It wasn't quite that much, but we normally dropped out of a 45-degree dive bomb pass. And then from there on, it's just using your heads-up display and known parameters and release altitudes, rolling in on the target. And, you know, you could, once you acquire a target, you could probably roll in on it within 30 seconds.
Once we get down to low altitude, the F-16 pilot's number one threat at that altitude is guns, AAA, anti-aircraft fire, or either handheld rifles just being pointed in the air. A bullet in the right place in the engine or flight controls can do some damage. And he is trying to deny a tracking solution at low altitude to negate that gunner. As we get to low altitude, we begin maneuvering the airplane. In the event someone's shooting at us, we try to be as unpredictable as possible and deny them that tracking solution before they're ever even pulling the trigger.
Love to go out and shoot the gun because the fact that the rate of fire is so fast and it really pours lead out so quickly. Even a short burst has you get a lot of bullets out. You may just hold the trigger down for half a second or so, and you'll still get 50 shots or 50 rounds out, which is plenty to do the damage. It only takes one to hit your target. More of a fatiguing factor is just the fact that what you're doing, in a combat situation now, is you've got the adrenaline flowing. You know you're being shot at. You're trying to make sure that there's no enemy airplane or missile systems shooting at you. You're trying to watch your wingman, and he's watching you, and you're trying to find the target. Just from that high adrenaline flow and the excitement of the situation, that can be tiring over a time period.
I think in a simple term, what we'd like to talk about is having situational awareness, and basically the head work to know where I'm at, where I'm going, what is around me, what can hurt me that's around me, and how can I use my weapon systems and my countermeasure systems in my aircraft to best increase my survivability.
As you look over the jet, as you're flying into there, you see people actually shooting at you, and you can see the explosions a little bit down below the jet, and you realize that those are the people actually trying to shoot you out of the air. So it's almost in a fight concept where you know people are throwing stones at you, and you want to kind of get a little ticked off, and you go, whoa, let's take this guy out. So but basically the scenario, what happened was we launched off alert yesterday morning, and they were calling for us to get up there and help them. We got up there, as we crossed the border, I mean, immediately people started shooting at us, you know, and then again, that gets your attention when you see little puffs of smoke going by your plane. So we were talking to what we call a FAC, forward air controller, and he was trying to talk us in on a specific point for us to hit. Needless to say, we took the point out, and there was a whole bunch of targets that were down there on the ground, and we just, I don't want to say surgically removed, but we removed the ones that we were trying to remove that looked like they were going to cause the most problems for our units.
There was some chatter on the radio, people talking, and as soon as they started getting hot bandit calls southbound, like, boom, no more talking. The ALAC's controller was the only person talking. People were really interested in what's happening. As soon as they turned south, a lot of relief in the voices. Continued on as we started approaching in there. I was just thinking, gee whiz, we're really going to do it. Saw the target, rolled in there, and after that it was just like shooting a practice round or going out there and training like we do every day. Saw the target and let her rip. And everything we dropped, everything we shot, the jets, everything worked as advertised.
Well, there's a lot of holes in the desert. A lot of bombs have been going off. There's still a lot of what we call bad guys up there. We saw some running down the road today. Saw a lot of vehicles and things in revetments, but a lot of holes in the ground. But there's still a lot of targets too.
We had so many aircraft waiting that the forward air controllers could not handle us quickly enough to funnel us into the fray. I held for approximately 20 minutes, told him either find me a target or I'm going to go on an armed recce, and he finally passed me Army barracks for a secondary target. We headed north across the border and found a target of opportunity, which looked like a truck park / supply dump, and we expended ordnance on that. There was a lot of smoke out there on the battleground, a lot of things burning, vehicles, oil wells, some light scattered AAA. We did not encounter very much in the way of AAA on our particular attack run. No enemy aircraft. I saw an occasional SAM indication on my sensors, but nothing serious.
We always talk about making your next bomb better, and sometimes it's tough to recognize what you did wrong, but you normally, you look at it, you can say, oh, I was steep, or the winds were this and that, and not what I thought they were, and you come back around and get it better the next time. Just the other day from over here, I lost all my right side hydraulics. The system just failed and a line ruptured. Again, from the day we get into pilot training, and even before you even step in the first airplane, the other thing they stress is emergency procedures, and we practice every day that. Every briefing we go through an emergency. Every month we need to go and sit in the trainer and practice them. So we get good at it, and as you probably can imagine, emergencies can get bad really fast.
There is a necessary amount of danger that you have to be willing to accept when you go out to do your job, because that's just part of the game, and we have to do that, and we're all willing to take that chance.
It's pretty incredible when, that was my 39th mission, and, been flying out, I've been shot at a lot, but hadn't got hit, so when I finally get hit, it's actually an initial, it's anger. It's like, I can't believe, I got hit, these guys got me. I'm looking at all these lights lighting up in the cockpit, just going, there's a fire light. I've always wondered when that thing would go off, and then I confirmed I was on fire, and people asked me later, what were your caution lights saying? They're all the yellow ones. I said, hey, I had so many red ones going off, I didn't really get too concerned about the yellow ones.
We got over there, the younger guys criticized some of us older guys for not being as intense as they thought we should be. And I got down to him one day and I said, you know, it really doesn't matter if you know that the head of an SA-6 has 16 titanium bolts holding it on there, and they've got a 1-inch pitch and 45 threads to the inch. What matters is how long it burns, how fast it goes, and how you maneuver away from it. The ability to compartmentalize is very important in a military pilot. In other words, I've got to be able to walk out of this office and put aside all the questions, all the problems, all of my own personal problems too, and walk over there, and when the door closes on the briefing room, I am now 100% in that room, planning that flight, and when I climb in that airplane and close that canopy is just closed out the rest of the world except for my mission.
In the Harrier community, we all tend to be a bunch of individualists. I'll bet if you take 10 people out, they'll land the aircraft 10 different ways. Based on a landing rollout that we want to achieve is pretty much going to determine how much nozzles we're going to deflect in our landing. Anywhere from 0 up to 82 in a hover is what we'll deflect. If I want to roll out about 1,000 feet, I'll probably come in with maybe a 70 nozzle, 60 knot landing. If I'm going to a confined site coming off the perch, I'll roll in, and as approaching my pad, I'll go ahead and bring it right into what we call the hover stop, 82 degrees, and slow the aircraft down. If it's real hot out and I'm real heavy and I don't have a hover capability and I want to roll out, then maybe I'll use a 50 nozzle rollout.
You're generally doing somewhere between 300 and 400 knots as you approach the field. You start in that hard turn, you're actually doing a 180-degree turn to parallel the runway. You're trying to slow down to about 200 knots, and generally, if you've done it right and you've managed your throttle properly, you're hitting about 200 knots as you're rolling wings level on downwind. You lower the landing gear. The F-16 is unique in that it has no flap switch. The landing gear is a gear and flap handle, and that the flaps are automatically positioned when you lower the landing gear. Once the gear comes down in place, you check that you have 3 green lights, a quick check over to the hydraulic pressure to ensure that it is in the acceptable region. Coming across the left-hand turn, flying about 11 units angle of attack for the F-16. You check that halfway through the turn, you've lost half your altitude, you're 90 degrees to the runway now. As you start rolling out on final, the power's coming back and the pitch is decreasing to about 2.5 degrees. From there, it's simply a visual fly the aircraft down to the touchdown zone, adjusting the airspeed to try to get the airplane on the ground. One thing about the F-16, it wants to fly so much that you really need to be on speed. If you're a little bit fast, the airplane will balloon or bounce very easily just because it wants to stay in the air, and it's a very difficult airplane to get to sit on the ground. Being on speed on final is a very important thing in the F-16.
The attackers live and fly in a difficult, low-level environment. The lessons learned from the Persian Gulf have already been incorporated into the training of new pilots. Technology will improve, adding yet newer capabilities for the attackers, while tactics will become more sophisticated as the battlefield of the future evolves.
Clear transfer secretary 4813. All the areas 8,000 and below. Roman 7 Desert Control, roger. Duties 25, altimeter 2973. Wind clear to the west block 1200. Report the initial to the tower. Good day.